Good morning and welcome to BBOC Live presented by BetMGM. It's 10:30 a.m. Eastern and this is the Thursday Conference Tournament College Basketball Betting Preview. I'm stuck in. Joining me today are Mike Calabrese, Greg Waddell, and we brought in Anthony DeBundo to join us. Anthony is, if you are not in our Action Network Discord, make sure you join that. Some really good stuff there. Anthony's trying to take it over in March with soccer content, so I might have to ban him if he keeps that up, especially next week. But Anthony, any soccer winners before we get started?
We got international break coming up, so we'll have next week off, which is nice. They designed it perfectly to coincide with the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, but what about today? Aren't there any matches today?
Nothing today for me that the current numbers.
All right. Well, we do have a lot to get to today in college basketball. We will give out two best bets each. We will also build a moneyline underdog parlay, and we will talk one marquee matchup. We'll go to the Big East for that one between St. John's and Seton Hall, two teams that are, I guess you could call on the bubble. But before we get started, I want to remind everyone to make sure you download the award-winning Action Network app. You can find all of our bets there in addition to an abundance of data and content for today's slate and beyond. Also, as I mentioned previously, BBOC is presented by North Carolina's newest sportsbook, BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet $5. For new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Let's get right into it with our best bets. I'll kick things off. I'm going to go with Maryland catching the points against Wisconsin in the Big Ten. I think this is a game where points will be at a premium, low scoring, grinded out affair. Happy to take the points here. Maryland has been super close. I think 8 of their last 11 league losses when they were at full strength have come by 5 points or less. The Wisconsin defense has really fallen apart as of late. Key here is, Maryland can't go 1 of 30 from 3, which sometimes they tend to do. But Julian Reese has got to stay out of foul trouble. But I think if he does, then Maryland can hang around here. I think this game goes right down to the wire. But I won't go too much in depth because we have more on this game in just a bit. But let's throw it to Anthony for his first best bet. You got a basketball angle here.
Yeah, so we're going to Iowa, Ohio State, first half under 73. So these are two teams that both use the Nike basketball all year long. And we saw that in the tournament last year, the NCAA tournament, that the Wilson ball really threw off some of these teams and their shooting splits, especially in the early rounds, most famously Purdue especially. But these two teams in the Big Ten and the SEC and the Big 12 are using the Wilson ball for their conference tournaments this year. And we saw yesterday in those two games, both teams who used the Wilson balls for the first time and who are less familiar with it, first half unders were 3-0 in the relevant games yesterday in the SEC and the Big Ten. Of course, it's a small sample. You don't want to overreact. But I think there is some signal to it, especially when you consider, what we saw in the tournament last year as well. This also applies to Michigan State and Minnesota. So I did take some first half under there as well. But I like this Iowa, Ohio State first half under. There's a real adjustment period, I think, to the new balls, which are grippier and thus like they're a different feel when you're shooting the ball.
Yeah, Purdue last year, and it ended up partly costing them 22.5% from 3 in 8 games that they used the Wilson ball. So this year they made it a focal point to try and practice more with the Wilson ball. So we'll see, because they did I think the Arizona game and a couple others they played with the Wilson ball. So we'll see how that increased familiarity plays out, but it's certainly an angle worth mentioning. I think it's crazy that we use different balls. It's ridiculous. It's something that I've thought about trying to track, but it's a mess trying to keep up with everything, and the sample sizes aren't great. But I think there's definitely some signal to it for sure. I just want to know what ball, as someone bet Georgetown yesterday, what ball was Georgetown using? 4 of 21 from the line? That's the only thing they do well. That's the only thing they do well, shoot free throws.
Yeah, medicine ball is what they're shooting.
Ridiculous. I think they shoot like 76% on the season. It's their only strength, and 4 of 21. It was pretty amazing to watch. But let's go to Greg, who's going to build on my case earlier, because you also like the Terps, Greg.
Yeah, I also just want to comment quickly on Anthony's play. I love that angle with the balls and the under, especially in the Big Ten tournament, when you consider that every team that's not Purdue and Illinois is a pretty bad basketball team, which takes me to this game, Maryland, Wisconsin. I'm right there with you, Stug. Maryland catching points here feels very off to me. We did the futures discussion at the beginning of this tournament, and I see a path forward for Maryland that requires them to win here. Both these teams 3-8 over their last 11. That's gross. But Stuck, you mentioned Wisconsin's defense has fallen apart, which is absolutely true. So has their offense, specifically their perimeter shooting. They're shooting just 30% from three since February 1st, 313th in the sport. That matches what my eyes are seeing, and I think that's truer to who they are than the team that was making shots back in November. And oh, by the way, Maryland has the top ranked 3-point percentage defense in the country in that same exact time span. I don't think Wisconsin's going to make much tonight. I think Jameer Young's the best player on the floor. And the first time these two teams played, it was a 4-point game. Wisconsin got the win at the Kohl Center. They shot 28 from 31 from the free throw line. Don't think that's going to happen on a neutral court. I'll take the team with the superstar, the team that's catching points.
All right, good stuff there. And Mike, you're staying on brand and going to the 8-10.
Yeah, I'm going to lay the points here. This is bubbling up at this point, 3.5, 4 now in the market. I still like Richmond in this spot, and it comes down to their head coach. Chris Mooney is a phenomenal tournament coach. The Big Dance, NIT, CBI, his last 6 tournament appearances, he's won at least 1 game. And when you look at the A10 tournament in particular, he's only been bounced in their first game once in the past 9 years. They have the defense to force St. Joe's into bad shots, as they did in their lone meeting this year, where St. Joe's shot 41%. The Hawks coming off a real rock fight against George Mason in their first round matchup. So I look at Richmond just as a defensive team that can really squeeze them, and they need Reynolds to play really well. And here's the thing, Reynolds' availability now in question with that right arm injury. Philadelphia Inquirer reporters, AP reporters saying that he's not warming up. This game is now going to tip in less than an hour. But our specialist, Anthony DeBundo, he's not just a Nike and Wilson ball specialist. He also just let me know that it seems as though Reynolds is going to play, or at least give it a go. I think if he has any availability issues or efficiency issues, St. Joe's is cooked in this game. They need him to go for 20 plus to upset the Spiders. So I'm going to go ahead and lay the 3.5. I'd play it up to -5.
All right, we'll have more on that game in just a bit, but let's shift our focus to the Big East and go to our first marquee matchup of the day. We're going to talk a little Seton Hall, St. John. St. John's 3.5, 4-ish point favorite here in the Garden. I believe both of these teams are in the field right now. A win today would lock their place in, but still an important game for both teams' resume. This is a pass for me. It's worth noting that Seton Hall did sweep the season series. They won in blowout fashion in the first meeting. The second meeting, St. John's blew, I believe, a 19-point lead, and Seton Hall came back to win that game by a couple of possessions. So we'll see if St. John's can avoid going 0-3 against Seton Hall. But I think this line is about right here. So this is a pass. DeBundo, what are you saying?
Yeah, so I need 4 to bet it. But shot quality, you mentioned those two meetings. Shot quality projected 87 and 88 offensive points for Seton Hall in the 2 regular season meetings, and they were dominant on the glass. The first win, over 50% offensive rebound rate for Seton Hall. Neither team really consistently makes outside jump shots. So if it does come down to rim defense, I think Hall and they do grade out marginally better than St. John's. They have the 2 best defensive players on the floor with Bediako and Richmond as well. So, the market's giving them a little bit of home court advantage. I'm always a little bit dubious that there's like a real home court advantage for St. John's in a tournament game in the Garden like this. I know the committee is also treating it like a home game, which is probably a little unfair, but I think that's a little bit high. So at 4, I would bet Seton Hall in this one.
Greg?
So I lean Seton Hall. I'm doing my best to stay away here, and I think ultimately I'm going to. Guys, I don't know what to make of the lower half of the Big East or the middle of the pack of the Big East. Like, I feel like I have a pretty good pulse on the top 3 teams when they're healthy. Outside of that, I'm not sure. We know that DePaul and Georgetown are horrendous. It seems like anybody else in the middle can beat each other. And this turnaround from St. John's, to me, is primarily schedule driven. It really is. Since January 13th, St. John's has 3 wins in conference play in 2 months against teams that aren't DePaul or Georgetown. I mean, they got both of those teams twice. That's 4 of their last 6 wins. I know they had one marquee big time statement win over Creighton. to me, the rest of that was just you got to play the teams that everybody beats. Seton Hall has 6 wins against teams that aren't those 2 teams in that exact same span. As you mentioned, they swept St. John's. Something about Kadari Richmond here just jumps out. Like, I'm not going to feel good if I'm on St. John's. Even if I have a 10-point lead early in this game, Kadari's the best player on the floor. So I'm going to stay away, but at the number, I think Seton Hall is the better play.
Yeah, it could basically just come down to who makes more outside shots, because both teams should live on the offensive glass. The strength of both aggressive defenses are a bit vulnerable there. So who's making their threes? Neither is a great shooting team. So taking the points might not be the worst plan, but you're looking at the total, Calabrese.
Yeah, I'm going to go over 142.5. Their last meeting was a complete rock fight, but really that was a statistical outlier for both of them in the past month. Their first meeting hit 145 without the benefit of late game fouling. And these two teams have played 8 games on neutral floors. I know it's a neutral floor for St. John's here, but they cashed 6 of those 8 by an average of 12 points past the closing total. So they've cruised past in those situations. And the Johnnies defense has been getting cooked from 3-point range since February 1st. They're allowing opponents to shoot over 40% from downtown. And I know neither of these teams are particularly effective from the perimeter, but the remedy for that is wide open attempts. So what I think the final point here for me is St. John's is playing catch up in this game. At least that's how I see it playing out, similar to their 2 regular season meetings. And if that's the case and they're fouling Seton Hall late, that's great news for the over. The Pirates are a top 20 foul shooting team in the country.
All right, looking forward to that one in the Garden. But let's shift our focus again and build a little 4-team moneyline underdog parlay. I will kick things off. Let's throw fight on. Let's throw the Trojans in there. A team that if they win this game, they are a real threat to be a bid stealer. They can play with Arizona. They have the size inside to at least throw at Ballo. They have the backcourt talent to match Arizona. And this team is playing over the past 4 weeks at a top 20 level. And they just weren't healthy all year, weren't able to build continuity. They finally got there. They have a couple guys with defensive player of the year caliber. They have a lot of size, like I mentioned. Isaiah Collier is playing at another level. And then Boogie Ellis capable of going 30 on any given night. I think USC has a good shot of pulling off the upset here. I know Arizona is going to be angry, wanting revenge, but this USC team is super talented and peaking at just the right time. So give me the Trojans. DeBundo, what are you throwing in?
So I don't love the fact that Eric Reynolds isn't warming up, but like I said, I do think he's still going to go. I like St. Joe's plus 140. This is one of the highest variance teams in the entire country. They shoot so many threes. They allow a ton of threes. But their variance from the 3-point line is the main reason that they have been so Jekyll and Hyde this season. When they're making them, they're as dangerous as anybody to pull off an upset. We've seen them go toe-to-toe, almost won at Rupp in Kentucky as well. And Richmond doesn't really shoot a lot of threes. So, you're trading 2s for 3s, which in the modern game, I'm always happy to take an underdog who's going to shoot way more threes. And Richmond did win the first meeting by 7 at home, but shot quality graded that as a Joe's win by multiple possessions. The biggest vulnerability for St. Joe's is that they're not really good on the defensive glass. They have given a lot of extra possessions to A10 teams this year, and it has killed them. But again, that's not really Richmond. The Richmond, prioritizes getting back on defense. They don't really crash the boards. It's a kind of a Mooney special. So I'm going to go with St. Joe's plus 140. Hopefully Reynolds goes for us. If not, we're going to need some Ewing theory.
Yeah, definitely a high variance team, so always worth a look as a money line option because they shoot a ton of threes. They play really compact defense and give up a ton. So definitely the 3-point output for both teams will play a large role in determining the outcome there. Greg, you're staying in your comfort zone with the Big Ten.
I sure am. I think there's a massive misprice here. I think Indiana has been playing fantastic over the last 2 weeks. They're a much different team than they were earlier this season when Penn State swept them. First of all, they're healthier. Xavier Johnson missed those 2 games. On the season, Indiana's 12-6 when Xavier Johnson plays. They're 6-7 when he doesn't. Now, Xavier Johnson is no savior by any means, but he is really important given the fact that they don't have anybody else who can dribble on this team. What they do have is a superstar that's emerging in Mackenzie Mbako. He's a totally different guy than he was at the beginning of the season. In his last 7 games, he has 4 games with 3 or more made 3-pointers. He had just 2 games where he hit that mark in his first 24 this this season. They've started playing him at his more natural position, sliding him down or sliding him up, excuse me, up to play the 4, going a little more small ball instead of forcing him to play with the 2 bigs. And it's worked. They're 4-0 in their last 4 games outright. Ever since the rumors of the mass exodus, Mike Woodson's kind of looking like he's here to stay. Everybody wants him out. Trey Galloway announced he's coming back to Indiana. He, by the way, should play in this game. I know he missed the second half against Michigan State. Sounds like he's good to go. I think it's hard to beat a team 3 times when the team you beat the first 2 times is a totally different version of themselves. Catching plus points here feels great. I'll take them on the money line.
All right, so far we got USC, Indiana, St. Joe's, and Calabrese. You're gonna throw in more love for Maryland. What could possibly go wrong with all this love for the Terps?
I mean, you guys talked me into it. Also, Reese, the way he looked in the last game, he played great, 16-6, three stocks on the defensive end. That's what we need from him in this particular matchup. But you're also going to need Young to have a breakout performance. And he nearly got it done against Wisconsin on the road, scoring 20 plus in a 4-point loss. So I feel like he's right there. But really, this is more so than anything fading Wisconsin. I mean, this late season swoon for them, they can no longer be trusted on the defensive end. They're 100th in Torvik defense since February 1st. As Greg pointed out, since February 1st, Maryland, the #1 3-point defense in terms of shooting percentage of their opponents. So I just view these two teams, yes, they had similar records down the stretch, but Maryland was knocking on the door. I think Wisconsin, they just haven't been able to fix what's been ailing them. So I'll go ahead with the Terps. I think there's good value, plus 145.
Yeah, just please stay out of foul trouble, Mr. Reese. That has killed Maryland all year. Early in the game, if he has like 2 fouls with 4 minutes into the game, could spell death. All right, let's move on to our final task, and that's our second and final best bet. I will get things started. I'm going to go with UT Arlington, late night tonight against Stephen F. Austin. They have the rest of it. Stephen F. Austin went to overtime, but both of these teams are deep. Both of these teams play very similar. I mean, a ton of free throws, a ton of turnovers. But I just trust UT Arlington to make more free throws and to make more 3-pointers. Is a much better shooting team. And this Arlington team, I think, is just undervalued in the market. One of the most improved teams in the country. Since February 1st, they're 9-2. Their 2 losses have combined 3 points. They ranked 71st in overall adjusted efficiency per Torvik, only slightly behind Grand Canyon in the league. I think Stephen F. Austin is around 200th over that span with a 6-6 record. It's just a different team. Philip Russell got eligible, who didn't even play in their loss in a season series split with Stephen F. Austin, but he got eligible. He's huge just from a ball handling perspective and scoring as well. Cash is now fully healthy. Different team here. So I like UT Arlington to get it done. DeBundo, where are you going for your final best bet?
Lay some chalk here in the Mountain West. Utah State -12 against Fresno. There's an interesting thing happening in the market with Fresno State where they had this terrible finish to the season. The market kind of wrote them off. The KenPom projection yesterday was Wyoming -5. They closed as high as 7.5 underdogs against Wyoming. So the market wanted no part of Fresno, wrote them off, said they quit. Fresno pulls off a minor upset yesterday. They win that game. They come back to do it. And now the market loves them some Fresno. They're being priced 2 points above the market projection. And I don't really think this is a good matchup for them. They just played a couple weeks ago in Fresno, and I know the game went to overtime, but Utah State closed a -10.5 on the road. Now it's 12 on a neutral. Utah State, dominant rim offense. That's their thing. They pound the ball on the interior. They get easy 2s. And that's a weakness of the Fresno defense. They're 324th in near proximity field goal rate allowed per Haslametrics. So they can't take away the rim. And then offensively, you can beat these Utah State guards if you have good shot makers, good quick twitch athletes. Fresno State doesn't have any shot makers consistently. They're one of the worst shooting teams in the conference. So I think this is a bad matchup for them. I'm going to take the discount. KenPom has it at 14. I think you're for some reason the market loves this Fresno team. They lost 4 of their last 6 games by 20 plus going away, and they were a team that was quickly fading. So I want no part of them. I'm laying the Aggies.
Yeah, Fresno State's a team also. They got a couple of guys back, but they've suffered a lot of injuries. I mean, they're basically it's just 7 guys now. So legs could be an issue here with those jumpers on the back-to-back. Greg, what do you got for your final best bet?
I'm moving to the Big 12 to a team we talked about on the Futures episodes earlier this week. And the reason we talked about them on the Futures episodes is we thought the bracket could break right. And it has. We have Cincinnati taking on Baylor. Baylor was 7-1 pre-tournament to win this tournament, and it looks like they have a great chance to do so at this point. The Kansas injury situation was real. Cincinnati's third game in 3 days here. They haven't played particularly well, in my opinion. Normally, you think a team's catching hot and trending in the right direction. Not really. They almost got bit by West Virginia the first game. They got torched defensively, and then they let a very depleted Kansas team hang around. That game ended up being a 20-point blowout, but it was a one-possession game midway through the second half. I didn't like what I saw from them yesterday. I think this is just a caliber difference. I think Baylor has at least the 3 best players on the floor. The first time these two teams played, Bridges, Nunn, and Misi combined for just 12 points. They shot 5 for 20 from 3, and Baylor won the game. That's not going to happen again. I'm sorry, Cincinnati, but I think your Cinderella run here is over. And just for the record, I had it at -5 this morning. It looks like it's on the move. It's up to -6.5. I would play it up to -7 and feel comfortable.
Yeah, Kansas basically just punted that game. I mean, they had no interest in making a run. It's all eyes on the NCAA tournament. Let's get healthy for next week. And yeah, you're right. West Virginia absolutely carved them up. And one final bet. Calabrese, close us out.
The UMass disrespect is real. The future MAC league member is catching points against VCU. I don't get it. When you look at Evan Maya's opponent adjust metric, UMass is the top team in the A10 when playing up. So when playing quality opponents, they play their best basketball. I think they are primed to make a deep run in this A10 tournament. We know what they have in their front court. Cohen and Cross dominated VCU in the regular season meeting. They scored 38 as a duo. They won by 22. And now VCU comes into this game having had the same game scripts really for the past 6 weeks. They've been a slow starter. 5 of their last 7 games, they've been trailing at halftime. I think that's going to allow UMass to dictate the pace in this game. And then finally, VCU lives and dies from the three-point line. UMass struggled earlier in the season defending that, but in the past 6 weeks, they've inched into the top 80 in terms of perimeter defense. And I think that's going to be the difference here. Unless VCU makes double-digit threes, I think UMass is the better team in this spot. So I'll go ahead and take the Minutemen plus the 1.5.
Eric Reynolds is now warming up for what it's worth. Update.
Good news
Let's go.
for
Hawk will
your
never die.
round robin piece. We will see how effective he is. That game should tip shortly. And then we have nonstop action that'll go till 2 in the morning-ish. So 14 hours of madness is in full effect. Thank you to Anthony, Greg, and Mike for joining me. Thanks to our producers on the back end. Most importantly, thanks to all of you for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe, like button. Couple final reminders. Make sure you download the award-winning Action Network app. You can find all of our bets there in addition to an abundance of data and content for today's slate and beyond. Also, as I mentioned before, BBOC is presented by North Carolina's newest sportsbook, BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet $5 for new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. We'll be back same time tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Also on Saturday, we will have a live bracket reaction show, 8 p.m. Eastern on Sunday night, and then tons of content, big bets on campus, wherever you listen to podcasts covering the NCAA tournament throughout the week next week. Good luck on all of your wagers. Enjoy the madness, and we will see you tomorrow morning. Cheers.